our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Sky King, do not answer. Victor, Foxtrot, authentication, Delta Golf.
It is definitely coming this way. Pieces of it are shooting off. There is no doubt about it. This is weird. Look at that thing, dude. It's rotating.
You are listening to Anomaly.
Hi everyone, back again from the home of Anomaly. Gledder's here. Steve's here too. Hi Steve, how are you?
I'm fine, how you doing?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. It's been a little while since we've done an episode together.
It's life's taken different directions really, hasn't it?
Life happens.
Yeah.
But it's all right. We're going to try and get a few more under our belt, aren't we? So we've got a great interview lined up for tonight. So Dr. Ian Rubenstein works in general practice in Enfield, North London. He has a diploma of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and is a fellow of the Royal College of General Practitioners. He has an inquiring mind and is following the current UAP news very closely. As if that wasn't enough, he's also an author and a medium. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
It's very good to be here, Paul. Nice to be here, Steve.
Ian, we're going to be talking tonight about your mediumship practice, but there's an awful lot more to you than that. I was wondering if we could start off with, who is Ian Rubenstein? Where did you grow up? What sort of things were you interested in?
I grew up in Tottenham, North London, and I haven't come far, actually, because the bus I used to take to my school goes straight along the A1110, I think it is. So it's the Hertford Road. And it used to terminate at Ponders End, which is where my practice is. So I tell my patients my career is literally at the end of the line. In fact, I've led a linear life because my school was along the same route. And then when I trained in medical school in Nottingham, then came back to do my GP training at North Middlesex Hospital, which actually was at the end of my school rugby fields. And then I went from there, and now I'm living in Enfield and practicing Ponders End. So I've led a sort of one-dimensional life. I call myself Lee Valley man because I love the River Lee. It's my sort of spiritual river, and do a lot of walking around there, and I feel really part of the community.
There's a YouTube channel, and I forget his surname, but I'm pretty sure his first name is John.
John Rogers.
John Rogers. Okay, so you know exactly
absolutely
who I'm talking about.
I've never met him. I mean, I like to meet him, but I do this sort of the walks that he does. He's the idea you walk and just let your feet carry you. And I absolutely love it. I really do.
He walked past me when I was in a coffee shop in the little town that I live in. And he was doing a walk up of the River Crouch, I think. So although strangely enough, by the time I'd got up on my feet and run out the door, he'd disappeared. So maybe it's the phantom of John Rogers that I saw. So you're a North London boy. I'm just trying to think, the North Middlesex Hospital, is that the one that's just off the 406?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I know it well. I used to drive past it all the time.
So I did 4 years there, and then I trained at a local practice in Enfield. And once I qualified as a GP, I did a year in student health at the London School of Economics, which was fascinating. And then joined my practice in 1984. So I've been at Eagle House Surgery in Ponders End for 39 years.
Wow. Part of the furniture.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So what was it that made you want to become a doctor in the first place?
I was told to go there by Mr. Davies, my zoology teacher. I remember clearly. I called into his room and he said, "Rubenstein, what A-levels are you doing?" It was maths, chemistry, physics, and zoology, sir. Right, you're going to medical school? Yes, sir. So, I wasn't. Look, I mean, I think they realised that once I didn't have friends at school. I had experimental subjects. I think they must have realised. I got into hypnosis when I was 15. But basically, it was a really rough school. We were the last of the grammar lot. And it became a local school that took a lot of rough kids from the Sink estate. And the grammar teacher, I mean, they hadn't got a clue. Put it like this. it was basically during Vietnam. We didn't have prefects. You got drafted, right? You got drafted into duty because you were beaten up. So I did 4 A levels just so I did less prefect duty because it was brutal, you know. But anyway, so we used to actually hold the north door of the science block, and because these kids never want to go to school, but once you got them out of the school playground, they want to get back in just because they were being cussy. So I used reverse psychology. I used to open to say and smile and say, come in, and they look at me and they just hang out. So I was using psychology, but I taught myself hypnosis when I was 15. On account of this book I saw, which showed this sort of rather suave man with a cigarette and this swooning woman, I thought, I'll have some of that. And I ended up hypnotizing the kids. I mean, I was the swotty, overweight guy who was in the library because I used to go into the library so I could do my homework and not get beaten up in the school playground. But I eventually had all these kids queuing outside the library, waiting for me to hypnotize them. And the school got wind of it. And Mrs. Lambert, their deputy head, she called me in. She said, Ian, I think, yeah, how old? I was about 16. So she said, Ian, I do believe in hypnosis. I've got a degree in psychology, but you can't do it at school. Just sign this form. And basically, she was covering her ass. I mean, we're all doing it now.
Just don't do it at school.
Yeah, but no, I think she's great to get me to sign a form because, you know, she obviously was forward thinking. But she said, I mean, she must. I think they realised that I was probably medical school material. I mean, I didn't think, but. There we go.
It's definitely another string to your bow, though, isn't it? Because, you know, we were chatting off air yesterday and talking about other things that we have in common, and we're both interested in the field of psychodynamics.
Yeah, yeah.
And you studied for a while at the Tavistock.
Yeah, yeah.
That must have been something.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I trained, general practice was very holistic orientated. I mean, it's not like that now. It's all changed. But this was the 80s. My training practice, which was very holistic. So my mentor, a guy called Mike Carmy, was professor of primary care. He was doing hypnosis when I joined. I was actually doing hypnosis as a hospital doctor because we had a woman, we couldn't get the catheter out after she had a hysterectomy. And she was actually blocking the bed. And my boss, Miss Witt, she said, we can't get rid of this woman. I said, well, do you want to try some hypnosis? She said, yeah, do, please. So I hypnotized and we took the catheter out. It was no problem. So she started sending me patients. So I saw some private patients as a trainee. So there was, I think I was the only trainee with a private practice. And the reason why I was doing that was because Margaret Thatcher was in power and I was frightened that she was going to abolish the NHS. And I thought, well, you know, because it might have all gone pear-shaped.
You're talking Steve's language there as well, I think.
Yeah. So I thought, well, okay, that's not my politics, but I thought, that maybe that's the writing on the wall. So Mike was doing hypnosis. I was doing hypnosis. And Bill Moore, my trainer, who I was attached to, he just was studying acupuncture. So he taught me acupuncture. So I've used hypnosis. I don't use hypnosis now because it takes up a lot of time, but I did acupuncture a long time. So I do acupuncture. So I've always been interested in the broader view. And when I trained as a GP, you were trained to look at the whole patient. I mean, you still are, but unfortunately, the way medicine's going, it's becoming very protocol driven and very ropes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's like that with every single profession. I'm sure the police have got that. I'm sure the fire service got everybody, and teachers got it. You have to stick to the script, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't like sticking to scripts. I'm too old for that. So
the thing is,
my partners have put up with me.
If you're, I don't want to blow smoke, but if you're clever enough to think outside the box and think laterally, then having a script is actually quite suppressing. It sort of constrains you. And you know, we see it when we phone up and you get put through to a call center and everything's coming off a script, and it's just the most frustrating experience.
I mean, I try and get someone into hospital, right? And you get put. So I'm a doctor. I know what the patient. I'm trying to get the patient seen who's been accepted by hospital, and the poor person at the other end has to go through the script. Is the patient breathing? Yeah, patient's breathing. They just go through it, and I mean, you just have to bite it. It just wastes time. Absolute waste of time. There's no common sense in the system anymore.
Has this come about as a result of people being litigious, or is it something else?
Cost cutting. If you can get someone who's not trained to do it by according to an algorithm, that's what you do. And eventually they'll get rid of doctors because the algorithm will do it. He'll come into my room. He won't even come into my room. There'll just be a big button that says press here.
Press for the AI doctor.
Press for the AI doctor. Yeah, well, actually, my son's actually an AI researcher.
Oh.
He's actually works for Google. Yeah, I've had a ringside seat of that. It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I mean, I love all that stuff. Look, what's not to like? We've got AI, robots, even aliens. I mean, when I was a kid, this is the one. I knew it was going to be like this in the future. The one thing I just didn't think I'd be old in the future, but there we go.
Are you depressed at the lack of flying cars? Because I am.
Yeah, definitely. I want my flying car. Yeah. Exactly what I said. Where's my flying car?
They have them in Lincolnshire, Steve tells me.
I like Lincolnshire. I mean, I trained in Nottingham. Used to go to Lincoln quite a lot.
We trained at Queen's or at City.
Well, when I was there, Queen's didn't exist.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I was onto the campus and I did it was a City General and the General Hospital. I never worked at Queen's. I saw it being built.
Yeah.
But now they pulled down all the walls. I did my first house job, a surgery at the General Hospital. And now the ward I was on is now, I think, was Standard Life Insurance last time I looked. I had a lot to do with Nottingham because my wife, who I met at medical school, she's a doctor as well. She is, although she's Indian, she grew up in Nottingham. Her dad was one of the first Indian GPs in the country, and he had a practice in Mapley in Nottingham.
Yeah.
And they lived in Burton Jones. I used to go there quite a lot, but her mum's now 95 and living near us now, so we don't go to Nottingham now, but had a long association with the Midlands. And my wife is very practical. She trains as a GP, but she became a family planning training doctor. So she used to teach other doctors about family planning, how to fit coils and things. But she's been retired for a few years now.
Okay.
I'm just carrying on.
What I'd like to do is thinking about, as we're going to talk about mediumship with yourself today, and as with all things, there is a first time. So when were you first exposed to this?
To mediumship?
Yeah.
The first time I was exposed to mediumship was at the age of 19. This story, my wife, she used to roll her eyes because every time I told it, she said, I've heard this so many times before. So I was 19. And this is amazing. This story is amazing. I mean, I always say if the CIA wiped my mind, but they allowed me to have one memory, I say, give me this one, because this is gobsmackingly amazing. So first year at medical school, and it was summer 1974. So it was the summer holiday, the one long vacation we got. And my mate Nick was doing physics at Leicester. So we all came home and we were at Nick's house in North London. He brought his girlfriend from Oswestry. Felicity had come down and she was staying with him. And my sister was round. So the four of us were in his room. We were just having a chat one evening, about 10, 11 o'clock. And Felicity had long brown hair. She's quite a nice looking girl, dark complexion. And the background to it, though, is that she had a crush on me and my sister had a crush on Nick. So it was very adolescent. But there was a lot of tension, okay? A lot of adolescent tension. But I was playing up for it because I just started going out with my wife. So I was being a bit of Jack the lad and I was enjoying the attention. But we were having this chat. And then all of a sudden, as I looked at her, there was this blonde-haired snow queen with sort of shoulder-length blonde hair, a fringe, high cheekbones, and very, very thick white lips, like coated with frosted lipstick. But the lips hadn't formed properly. They looked strangely distorted. And this being looked at me, and there wasn't such a term as a download in 1974, but actually, when you hear these people, they say, I had a download from whatever.
Yeah.
I had a download. I mean, it was in my mind. It was dumped. Telepathically, instantly, stop. What you're doing is wrong. And I knew what it meant. Keep back. What you're doing is wrong. And then it was stern, but not unkind. Then it was mark this. No, there's more to life than meets the eye. And one day you will understand. And that was like in 2 seconds. And I just, and I think if no one else has seen it, I'd have just thought, what the hell was that? And just gone on. But at that moment, my sister went absolutely hysterical and started screaming at the top of her voice, my God, can you see those lips? Because she saw the profile and the lips were quite distorted. And I looked at my sister and said, well, you've seen it too. And then looked back at Felicity and she was completely normal. So Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is because that's actually called transfiguration.
Right.
That's well recognized. And I didn't know. I mean, I knew nothing about this in those days. Anyway, we ran around screaming like chickens with our heads cut off, jumped into my dad's car, went round to my mum and dad's house. It was now 2:00 in the morning. So you can imagine what they said. Take Nick and Felicity home and come to a bit silly kids. So the next day I phoned all my friends, and my mate Steve in Tottenham, he said, I don't know what it was, Ian, but my neighbour, Keith Hudson, is a medium. Why don't you come round and see what he says? So he went round to Steve's house, and there was this sort of tall, gangly guy, age 27. So he looked very old. When you're 19, somebody's 27 looks old. He was prematurely going bald, a bit strange. And he said, what you saw was her spirit guide. It was protecting her, presumably from me feeding on her energy. And I thought, wow, I don't know. I don't believe in spirit guides. It must have been a hallucination. But then the problem was, if it was a hallucination, how come my sister saw it? So I was at first year at medical school. I think they were still landing people on the moon. So I was really into science, and that really, really rocked my worldview. So what do you do with that? I mean, it didn't fit into my worldview.
I'd have been scared silly.
No, I wasn't scared. No, and it wasn't scary. My sister was really scared. I wasn't. I didn't get any. I mean, I thought it was amazing because it was like you're watching a play and you think it's real, and then someone moves the scene at the back and you get a glimpse of the backcloth. And you think, oh my God, that's what's really going on. But I mean, what do you do with it? I mean, I couldn't peg it into any worldview. So I just kept it to one side. And I told people the stories over the years at parties, or if patients asked me, do you think there's anything when you die, Doc? I said, I don't know, but I'll tell you this story. And I did tell lots of people, but actually that's quite important because Keith Hudson later came back into my life. And it was obviously a foreshadow of what was to come. Now, when Keith met me at Steve's house, he looked at him and said, you've got not a lot of knowledge around you, Ian. You don't know, but you will one day. And I thought, well, he would say that. It's an easy one because he knows I'm a medical student. I didn't think anything of it. But I'll talk about that later because I came across him later. And looking back, it was obviously something that had to happen. But that's how I got into it. I didn't know that was mediumship. I mean, he said that was her spirit guide. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was.
When you saw this face, this figure, was it fully 3D? Was it?
It was too quick. It was just like there was someone else there in her place.
Wow.
But with strange lips. And then it was instant. But the interesting thing is, when I started studying mediumship many years later, I came across Keith again. And he used to collect antiquarian spiritualist books. When you read the old Victorian books, they documented it all. They mentioned that often when spirit figures form, the ectoplasm flows upwards. So the top of the figure forms first and the bottom's less form. And actually, that's what I saw. The top of the face was okay, but the bottom was distorted, like it hadn't formed properly. But it wasn't like flowing ectoplasm. It was like instant, like a shift, and then it was gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it went because I looked at my sister and then looked back at Felicity and she was fine. So I don't know. But I've been to transfiguration demonstrations since then and never been convinced. But this was absolutely in your face, gobsmackingly convincing. So I'd love to see that again. I really would.
That is absolutely amazing.
I haven't had anything like that, which I would say objectively seeing with your eyes. So that was the first thing I got into. Actually, probably the very first thing was I had a near-death experience at the age of 9.
Okay.
And that might have something to do with it. I didn't put that in my book because I didn't twig it, but it's only subsequently reading because I know quite a bit now, but I wasn't an expert before. I wouldn't call myself an expert. I've read quite a bit. So when I was 9, I had my tonsils out in the North Middlesex Hospital, as strange to say. And it was complicated. I was bleeding a lot from where they took the tonsils out, and I had to go down and have the operation again. I'd lost quite a lot of blood. So I wasn't going to die, but I was quite ill. And under the anesthetic, I had what I thought was a dream because I was 9. So I was born in 55, so about 1964. Term near-death experience, tunnels and lights. No one had documented it. But I was in this dark tunnel, and it was like a black garden polytunnel, but big, one you could walk in. And I was there, and out of my abdomen was a very thick stalk, like molten glass. And that was being pulled out of my abdomen and rotating down this tunnel.
Oh my God.
The tunnel was curved to the left. Yeah, it's very weird. And on the end of that, like in the distance, was a little bright spark. Now, I was 9 and I knew that I really was that little bright spark, that little star in the end of this stalk.
Right.
Then he went round the corner and then I went under the anesthetic, or I just lost consciousness. Right, okay. So that could have been a dream. But let me tell you what happened. So I was a senior house officer in gynecology 17 years later at the North Middlesex Hospital. And I was on call for gynecology. And in those days, what used to do, GPs would refer you out of hours, say with women who'd had babies, but they were still bleeding. And you would have to arrange an emergency D&C. So you'd have to basically scrape the womb. And you do that out of hours. So I had to phone the anaesthetist, book the theatre, and then go down and do the operation. It's quite a simple procedure. One night, I'm doing it, and I phone the operating department. They say, oh, you can't use this operating theatre. It's being refurbished. Someone will meet you and show you where the temporary operating theatre is. So someone met me and she led me through, and I walked into this operating theatre, and I just felt like I'd been hit by a sledgehammer. I said, I've been here before. She said, well, you can't have been. I said, but I know I've been here before. She said, well, you can't have been. It's the old paediatric ENT theatre. Hasn't been used for 10 years. And that's where I would have had my tonsils out. But the thing is, when you're anaesthetized, you're in a side ward. So you don't see the operating theatre. Also, all operating theatres look pretty similar. And I wasn't expecting that, but I just knew I'd been there. So there's obviously something psychic there, I think. I mean, I like to imagine. So I'm actually trying to go through my life and work out this pattern. So I think
it does seem very much like there's a thread that runs all the way through. Yeah. And, you know, I had a near-death experience when I was, I think it was 11 or 12, after pretty much drowning in the school swimming pool. And, you know, it didn't take very long and I was back before I knew it. But, you know, that whole tunnel of light, and I knew I wasn't supposed to go that way, so I came back. But I think I was very struck by that. It's an incredibly powerful experience to go through. And again, it's something that bothered me. I didn't find it a nice experience, but you know, different for all people. I guess the question I'd put to you as a doctor, could there be some sort of chemical formulation for this from being put under anesthetic that might cause this?
Oh yeah. I mean, I thought it was that. I always used to tell the story, but I thought it was just that. It wasn't until I was trying to look at, well, why me? Why have I had these weird stuff happen to me in my late 40s? And then I was reading that people who had near-death experiences often end up having paranormal experience afterwards. It's not uncommon. You come back with certain gifts. So yeah, another thing happened to me when I was 16. So I was told the name of my wife before I met her.
Wow. So
yeah, I mean, I was walking down the stairs at home, and my friend Steve, the one who knew Keith Hudson, he was mad about the only Indian girl in our school. And I didn't think she was that good looking. She looked like the Mona Lisa with glasses. She's a nice girl, but I mean, not my type. I was mad about this girl called Laura, blonde and cute, and I wanted to marry her. Anyway, so I was 16 and in puppy love. And I was walking down the stairs, and I used to jump down the stairs. So I knew my left foot was on the 11th step, my right foot was coming down the 10th step. I can remember it. And I remember idly thinking, what on earth does Steve see in this girl? And, you know, who are these Indians anyway? Because I didn't know any Indians. And I felt someone behind me, and it was like they put a cloak and then a hood over my head. And I knew that I was going to marry an Indian girl with a name like Pam. I mean, and it was such a strong feeling. I remember stopping, thinking, no, I don't want to marry Laura. But anyway, so I mean, that stuck in my mind. Anyway, when I went to medical school, and I met my wife, I mean, she doesn't look particularly Indian, and we started going out together. And her name's Poonam, Punam. I thought she was Turkish.
Okay.
She was from India. And so I did marry an Indian girl with a name like Pam. You take the U and the N out, you've got Pam.
Yeah.
So I mean, the reason I'm telling this is because I think this, for me, as an observer of my own life, it makes me think that I probably don't really know who I really am, who I truly am. I don't think we all do. And I don't think, and I think there's something really weird about time. And there's something also weird about our life patterns. So I suspect we come here with an agenda, a mission, and we have a function to fulfill. I'm not saying I believe it, but that's a hypothesis I use. I mean, I try not to do belief. Having said that, I really do believe in UFOs. I have to say that. I'm absolutely certain. But when it comes to this mediumship stuff, which really was not in my background, I'm still baffled how I got into it. I am a spiritualist with a small s. In other words, someone who deals with spirits, but with a big S, like a true believer spiritualist as a religion. I hang out with big S spiritualists, and I'm very sympathetic towards them. And I use that framework when I'm doing what I'm doing. But I will hang fire. I mean, I believe. I would say my heart believes. My head's still got doubts because I can always psychologize ways that this might not be real.
Yeah, understood.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
does.
the skeptical science bit. Yeah.
Paul and I were talking about quite a famous medium, internationally famous one. And I saw this person live, and I know this person's quite litigious, so we're going to be quite careful what we say.
Yeah.
It might give you clues who we're talking about. It was a very entertaining evening, but what I saw from what this person was doing was she was a very good reader of people.
Oh, yeah.
There was no, I'm not saying that what was going on was cold reading or anything like that, but it was a very, very entertaining evening. And I think that is done for entertainment purposes.
Yeah. No, I mean,
and that's maybe the difficulty when you have somebody who does have a gift.
Yeah.
And these people are going on TV, they're doing sellout tours and everything. And what they're doing is probably more psychological, and sociology, and that sort of thing going on than actual spiritualism.
You've got to understand. First of all, the purest medium was a guy called Albert Best, in Scottish Glaswegian medium. I think he was the adopted. I think Georgie Best. I think he adopted Georgie Best, the footballer. Anyway, they were linked to Georgie Best, and I think he was an Irish medium who lived in Glasgow, and he would have he'd have packed audiences, but if he didn't have the power, if he didn't feel he could do it that day, he'd say, "I'm very sorry, I haven't got the power this evening, you'll have to go home." Remember, what you're doing as a medium is you are picking up on the whole person, so you will definitely be doing cold reading. There's no doubt about that. You can't help it, and you'll think, "And is that grandfather?" But no, that's inevitable. You do that, and that's why. Funnily enough, when the pandemic came on, and was the groups where my development circle, where we moved over to Zoom, where you get less cues because sometimes you didn't even see who were doing. Actually, the mediumship was better because this second guessing and the cold reading bit often confounds a pure reading. So sometimes the most ridiculous, you think, no, that can't be right. I'm not going to give that. But if you were to give it, the person would say, yeah, that's absolutely right. But because you think, well, that doesn't fit with their face, doesn't fit with their background, I'm not going to give that. So it's very hard to loosen all that. And that's what you've got to learn. And that's what mediums call trusting your spirit guides. And so spiritualists believe that they don't work on their own, but they're working with a group of other spirits from the other side. And you can imagine, like, you have to raise your vibrations and the communicating spirit has to lower its vibrations. And the spirit guides are sort of in between, trying to pull their communicator down to your level and trying to bring you up to their level.
I'm very interested in the mechanics and the mechanisms that are at work with this. I was just wondering, before we go there, could I possibly take you back to the day that you were in your surgery and you had a patient in the surgery who had something of a revelation for you?
Keith Bishop. Every doctor should have a patient like Keith Bishop. When Keith comes into your life, you're going to go on a journey. Sometimes literally. I'll tell you a story about him. Keith is lovely. He's now my friend. actually, I need to contact him. He completely changed my life. Absolutely. If it hadn't been for Keith, none of this would happen. And he does that for other people. So Keith is actually, now he's a PR guy, and he runs a firm called Keith Bishop's Associates, and he does work for Mike Ashley, and Newcastle FC. He negotiates on his behalf, and he knows lots of people. He's been around. He would be very entertaining. He'd come and see me, and he'd always tell me some showbiz gossip, and it was great. Anyway, so the trouble is with Keith, like a lot of people in that field, he could be a bit unreliable. He's a bit of a lover. He's lovely, bit of a schmoozer. He'll say, "Oh, lovely, and nice to see you, top doc, lovely," all that sort of stuff. But so I was in my surgery. He was the last patient in the morning, and I wasn't really going to hang around because I thought he might not turn up because he was a bit late. I was just about to go, and then I felt something push me back down to my chair. I tried to get up again. I felt the urge to sit down again, and then the phone rang, and it was his PA saying that he was at the local station, and he's a bit late. Could I wait? So I said, yeah, I'll wait, but I'm not going to wait all day. He came about 5 minutes later, and he'd been running, and he was very red-faced and sweating, and I had to take his blood pressure. So, oh God. So I thought, well, this isn't going to be quick, is it? So I thought, calm down and let him speak. So he told me a bit of the gossip, and then he looked at me and he said, "I'm terribly sorry, Doc, but I've got this man here. He's the grandfather you never met, and he wants to speak to you." Now, I've been going through a really bad time with my family at that stage. In fact, my wife and I have been ostracized from the family because I basically decided to stop being a good Jewish boy who was good to his mum and dad and try being my own person. And that didn't go down very well. And I realized that all my cousins had the same problem. So I researched the family, and I realized that my mother's grandfather, who'd had a bakery shop in Cable Street in the East End. He had 2 bakery shops. He was doing very successful, but he was a gambler. At the end of the week, he'd put his hand in the till and, blow it all on the horses. And I realized that was a problem, that boys couldn't be trusted, had to be controlled. And I interviewed all my cousins, and I came to that conclusion, interviewed my uncles and aunts about this. And I came to that conclusion. I think they all agree with me now. That was a problem in our family. When I realized it was down to my maternal grandfather, the one I never met. So I'd been thinking about him a lot. So when Keith said, "I've got this man here, is the grandfather you never met," I thought, bloody hell, how did he know that? So I sort of thought, okay, come on. So he went a bit blank. He didn't go into a trance, but it's like he was listening to someone over his shoulder. And he shifted gear and just started telling me everything that was going on in my life, everything that he couldn't possibly know. And after about 20 minutes, he said, "Was that all right, Doc?" Didn't say anything to upset you. I said, "No, Keith, it was amazing." After I picked my jaw off the floor, I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Oh, I've been listening to spirit all my life." I said, "What spirit? What do you mean listening to spirit? I'd never heard the term before." I said, "What? You listen to spirits?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Why didn't you? How can you never tell me that before?" Because I'd known him for 19 years at that time. He said, "Well, it's not the sort of thing you tell your doctor because he'll think you're mad." And I was already thinking I'd have to section him, and under the Psychiatric Act. But anyway, he then looked at me and said, "My spirit guide, William." I said, "Who's William?" He said, "Oh, he was my boss at the BBC. When he died, he became my spirit guide." And I'm thinking, this is bizarre.
Wow.
He said, he's saying that you should be doing this. I said, "What? Listening to spirit?" I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." Then he left. And then from that point on, my wife and I started experiencing the most amazing coincidences. I mean, really, it was like, too many to tell.
Sure.
I mean, it was like I was being led on a journey, and I had to pick up the clues.
I've got this image of you, Ian, sitting in your office in the surgery,
Yeah.
and the guy just left, and you just sort of sitting back in your chair, throwing your hands up in the air and going, "What?"
Well, what actually happened was my receptionist, Carol, said, "Ian," she buzzed me through, "Are you all right, Ian? You spent about half an hour with him." I said, "Yeah." I said, "He just gave me a spiritualism reading, a medium reading." And she said, "Oh, do you watch Most Haunted? It's really good, isn't it?" I said, "No, I never heard of it." So, so my receptionist, I mean, I told them what happened, and then they were waiting, "Oh, what's happened next, Ian?" Because I was going through I went to a party. And then the first person I met there, she said she grew up in a haunted house. And then, I mean, just weird stuff. It was like every time I was trying to go like a rat in a maze, being moved down the path. Yeah. And so eventually it became so crazy, it was driving me nuts. And my wife said, "This is bonkers." So she worked in a local clinic with one of my patients, who's a nurse. And this nurse's husband, Dave, was one of my patients. And Dave was a very sensible guy. He was he's one of these long-haired guy, but he was a science teacher, older than me, and he would sort of do the drumming at Stonehenge and did his time in sweat lodges, and came in with, feathers on him and stuff. But he was a lovely guy, very solid sort of guy. And I told him what was going on. He said, "Oh, Ian, you've got to join the circle." So what's that? He said, "Well, they're spiritualist churches, and that's where you develop, because if you don't, it'll drive you nuts." So I said, "Well, look," I said, "my wife's Hindu and I'm a non-practicing Jew. We don't go to places called churches." He said, "Well, Spirit want you to go. They'll find a way." And bugger me, that evening, I go home and Poona's reading the local paper and she's at the classified ad section. She said, "Here, is that Keith Hudson, the guy with Felicity's face, who I've heard about but never met for 27 years? You're going on about him?" I said, "Yeah, what about him?" She said, "He's giving a demonstration of clairvoyance at the local spiritualist church, the Beacon of Light in Enfield. Do you want to come?" I said, "No." She said, "Come and go." I said, "No, I'm not going." She said, "No, we'll go." So I said, "All right, I will go." So we went there. And I remember I sneaked into the back. I didn't want to be seen. I thought it was bonkers. I thought, these people are crazy. And so I sat at the back, and Keith actually looked pretty much, he hadn't changed because he lost his hair early. I mean, I used to have dark curly hair, and now I'm, you can see I've lost all my hair and I've gone grey. I look very different. So I sat at the back, trying not to be noticed. And Keith, being Keith, he was really good. He went through every single person in the congregation, gave them a message. When he came to me, he said, "Sir, you have a lot of knowledge around you." That's what he said to me when he first met me. He didn't know it was me. He said, "You have a lot of knowledge around you, sir. You don't know you know it, but you will very soon. And they're telling me you're going to be writing a book about it." And I thought, well, I bet he says that to everybody, but actually he doesn't. So he gave me the same message, apart from writing a book, that he did when I was 19. And he didn't know who I was, because at the end of the service, the president of the church said, "Would anyone give, Mr. Hudson hasn't got a car, would anyone give him a lift home?" So I, being my excitable self, leapt on. I said, "Yes, I'll give him a lift home, only if you come back to my house for a cup of tea first." He'd leapt back, because you do get some odd people at these services. When I saw that I was a bit too forward, I said, "Keith, it's me, Ian Rubenstein." He said, "What, the doctor?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I was just talking to Ralph about you, another old school friend, the other day." So he came back to my house for a cup of tea, and we caught up over 27 years. He said, "Look, Ian, you don't have to be a spiritualist. I run the largest development circle in North London. It's in Walthamstow. I don't call myself a spiritualist." He said, "Spiritualists are very narrow-minded. I call myself a seeker after truth." He said, "You can join my circle. You don't have to be a member of the church. You don't have to be a spiritualist. Just come and see what happens." So I did. So I joined his development circle at Vestry Road Spiritualist Church, which was really humming in those days. It's about, I think it was the 4th of February 2004. We get on for 20 years now.
Wow.
And that's how I started training as a medium.
So the development circle is a way of bringing on your own skills? Yeah.
Okay. So there's spiritualist movement obviously needs to train mediums, because the spiritualist services are prayers and everything, but the meat of the matter is actually proof of life after death. That's what they like to give evidence.
Okay.
So it depends on having people who can demonstrate this. So it's an evidence-based religion, you might say, which I rather like, because you're either right or you're wrong, or you're a bit iffy. But at least there's evidence there. It's not taken on faith. You've got to give out. And I learned two things. I thought so the first time I sat there, it was hilarious, because there's me, it's all overeducated, amongst people I grew up with, working class people from Walthamstow, Tottenham. I mean, I was one of them, but I'd moved on, and I was also, I'd been to medical school, and a lot of them hadn't been to higher education. And I didn't know what to expect. And the guy next to me, Joe, he looked like Gollum. He had shaved head, skinny, and he was covered in tattoos. He was a really nice guy. I got friendly with him. But I remember he sat next to him and he said, "Loosen up, Doc, we're not going to eat you." And I thought, bloody well are, aren't you? But the interesting thing was, so at the time, so we'd sit in a circle, and the idea was is you would try and give messages to the other members of the circle.
Okay.
And the way you do that is by just letting your mind go blank and going with the first thing that comes into your mind. So that's working at what you might call the psychic level. Now, what Keith said was, well, we did it in an interesting way. Rather than give a message to an individual, we'd give it to a number. So let's say there's 26 people in the circle. There's sometimes a big circle. Keith would, in his head, point at, say, a person, let's call her Jenny, make her number 1, and then go left or right. So clockwise or anti-clockwise. So everybody had a number. He didn't know that, but he knew she was number 1. He was going left. He was going anti-clockwise or clockwise. So everyone had a number. And what he said was, when you give a message, I thought this is bonkers, absolutely bonkers. He said, you'll give a message to the number, and your spirit guide will sort it out with their spirit guide to get the message to the right person. So I thought, okay, all right, yeah. And so this is a technique developed by a really good medium who's still around called Michael Redwin, actually.
Okay.
So basically what you've got is as in medical terms or scientific terms, it's a single blind trial, because it's more like a double blind, because he would know where you start, but he wouldn't really know the numbers. You just, at the end, he'd work it out. He'd have to crack the code. So even he wouldn't know that she was number 3 and 4. He'd have to work it out. So what would happen is you call out a number. So it was a bit like the old stock exchange, because everybody was calling out, "Oi, Keith, message for number 4," and he'd write it down we're in the dark. He'd have a Harry Potter illuminated pen, very apt in the dark. It was delicious. It was lovely. I mean, I was having the time of my life, because I'd gone from standard medical practice. It was. Being a doctor was a serious thing. All the time I was having the time of my life. I mean, I'd been released from the confines of my family, and I felt everything just opening up. I finally let go. My wife was really supportive as well, which was very, very good. Anyway, and my receptionist was supportive. I was telling my patients what I was going through, and they loved it as well. It was very interesting.
That is amazing, because I'm intrigued by so much of this, and as I said, mechanism of how it works, and you started to touch on it there with the numbering system and the decoding, but also, you're in a professional occupation, and I'm intrigued. So I used to be a policeman, and now people are very quick to criticize the police, and I can only imagine that with doctors it can't be too dissimilar. Okay,
that's what I thought. So, we'll get back to the mechanics in a minute. But as I developed, what I found was that my patients were much more accepting of this than I realized. And I realized one insight I gained from this, even if mediumship is a load of rubbish, I gained an enormous insight, which was my patients don't think like I think. Patients don't think like doctors. Most ordinary people, I'm not being disrespectful to my patients. My area is a very mixed area. It's sort of working class, lower middle class, a lot of people from all over the world.
It's very diverse, yeah.
Very diverse. And it's Eastern Enfield. And when I was speaking to them about explaining things, I thought they knew perfectly what I was going on about. I really, they don't think like me. Not at all. It was just, I threw that out the window. What they want is a story. I realized then that the diagnostic view of medicine that we do is it's important for the doctor, but what people want is a narrative that makes sense to them.
Okay, yeah.
That's really important. And it doesn't even have to be logical. In fact, it can sometimes be downright illogical, as I realized, but that's just as valid. So they were much more accepting of these weird experiences I was having. They just took it on the chin. A lot of them said, well, yeah, obviously you're in contact with dead people. I'm saying, how do you know that? I said, well, you're giving these messages. I said, yeah, but it could be that. It could be. No, Doc, just loosen up. It's just, you're in contact with spirit. Anyway, just a different way of thinking. And that was really good. And I like to think that I started off being like one of these researchers. I kidded myself. I thought the way I kidded myself was, oh, these are different people. These are funny people. I'm just studying them, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not really one of them. But I'm like one of these ethnographers who actually, in the end, I went native. And I realized that actually it's, that worldview is very valid. It might not be right in terms of strict scientific way, but then what's right anyway? I mean, it loosened all my preconceptions, basically. So I had enormous problems with this. I mean, really, because I was thinking, what am I doing? I'm interacting with voices in my head, because you have to learn how to speak to your spirit guides. But I remember when I did psychiatry, because I did 6 months psychiatry as a trainee.
Yeah.
I remember speaking to my senior registrar at the time. He was a missionary. He was a Christian guy. He'd done missionary work in Africa. So I was seeing these severely psychotic patients who saw things, and we were injecting them and everything. And I remember saying to him, I said, Michael, what I had this experience where I saw this face. I mean, you know, when I was 19. And then, why aren't you injecting me? You know, how come these patients might be in touch with spirit? I mean, how do we know? He said, look, Ian, it's like this. He said, when you saw what you saw, you found it valuable and insightful, didn't you? I said, yeah, it was amazing. He said, well, these people are diseased by what they're seeing. In other words, they have a disease. And that made sense, actually. So that enabled me to sort of, think, well, okay, so not everybody who has hallucinations, you know, in the medical term, is actually diseased. And actually, it's now known that about 10% of people hear voices or have hallucinations. And, you know, I think it was a famous mathematician who did. You could use it to your advantage. So, so it really loosened my preconceptions, I have to say.
It's really interesting. And something else I was thinking about there, you're treating, as a doctor, people from all over the world who have come to the UK. When and if mediumship comes up as a subject with people from different cultures, do you find that literally everybody is quite accepting, or are there people who are quite concerned about it? Or,
well, I mean, my Jehovah's Witness patients don't like it,
right?
I mean, I tell them, but we agree to differ. I mean, they're not nasty about it. Some people don't want to know. And you won't, I mean, I don't foist it on people, but I mean, sometimes I do get things come through.
Yeah. Which is another one of my questions, really. Do you, and I've got a whole bunch here, which I need to come back to, but when you have a spirit come through to you, and I probably need some clarification on what spirit actually is as well. But when somebody comes through to you, is it almost always a relative or loved one of the person that you're talking to, or can it be anybody that comes through?
Well, it can be anybody, but normally it would be someone. I mean, because if it's anybody, what you call a drop in.
Okay.
Unless they're giving information, how would you know? I mean, you're looking for evidence.
Yeah.
So if it's, I've got this, Joe Bloggs is here. Do you know Joe Bloggs? No. Well, he's telling you that, sorry, I don't know who he is. I mean, that often happens, you know, when you're in circle. I've got this person here and no one can take it. If someone can't take it, it's very deflating. You're only as good as a medium as your last message. Believe me. It's very, very deflating.
I just wonder what that says about spirit, as to whether some spirits are imposing or perhaps playful or mischievous.
Or maybe you're just making it up. I mean, you know, because basically it's all done through the filter of your mind. So it's not like you're a passive receiver. And what you have to learn when you're doing mediumship is, I mean, so you have to have a model. So I've accepted the spiritualist model as a working framework.
Okay, yeah.
Now, it may be wrong. It may be that completely wrong. It may be there is something paranormal, but it's not spirits. But you know, I don't know. Maybe the Akashic records. I mean, who knows? I don't know.
Okay.
But the spiritualist framework is what's been given to me. I seem to be sent into it. I mean, I'd be more like to be gone into UFO research, to be honest, with my interest. But no, I was drawn towards that. And it's a useful framework. I mean, there's lots of things in medicine where you, if we look at physics, for instance, like quantum physics, no one knows how it works, but mathematically it works. That's a useful framework. I'm not saying I did quantum physics, but it's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's a useful intellectual framework to work in. But then it's me. So whatever's happening, let's say there is a communicating spirit, it's coming through your unconscious mind. So what you're doing is you're trying to work with your unconscious mind. You had to work out how your unconscious mind works. So when you deal with a guide, now that might be an avatar of your unconscious mind that you can deal with, but you get to know how your guides present information to. Now, it may be what you're doing is you're creating an avatar, which you can work with, like an icon on your desktop.
Yeah.
You know, it's not real, but it's useful. And you're working with it. So, for instance, I think in terms of, I'm not very good with maths, but I'm pretty good with words and puns. So when I get messages through, they'll come through as puns or messages. I mean, I'll give you an example. I had a patient and I was pretty certain that I had a relative with her, and it was her uncle. We got that far. And then her uncle started showing me tennis. So it's Wimbledon, and I saw this man playing tennis. I said, did he play tennis? No, didn't play tennis. No, okay. Then I suddenly twigged. Was his name Dennis? Yeah, his name was Dennis. Because it's very hard to hear. I don't hear, well, some people will hear words, but I don't. With me, I'm quite visual. So how are you going to get across to someone? Because it's not like I can hear a voice or see something. I mean, I think it's a bandwidth problem. And in my case, if the bandwidth is quite low and I'm pretty dense, and all they can do is send images, and the images are largely what's in your mind anyway.
I was about to say it's a frequency issue, because
Absolutely, Steve.
If you said about vibrations, if you're trying to listen to the radio, like the old FM or AM, and your radio's slightly off the right frequency, you're not going to hear very well, be it music, be it speech, be it whatever, what's actually going on. So your brain's going to try and make up, if you like, the missing bits to it.
Yeah. I've got another analogy. You know the old MIDI files, because I like computers. So, you can modern MP3 files, they'll specify a waveform. So you don't, it'll play the music for you. You don't need to have a synthesizer or anything. But the old MP3, the old MIDI files basically were basically notes, like the old play a piano thing. Play this note on that, and so basically you had to have an instrument plugged into your computer. Interesting enough, the old-fashioned spiritualists called the mediums the instrument.
Yeah.
So I think it's like they can only use the notes that are in your head because if you think about the size of a MIDI file, it's not very big. The size of a Windows WAV file or an MP3 file is a lot bigger than the MIDI file. So I think when the frequencies, when your bandwidth is very low, then they can only send you a MIDI file. They can only point to things in your head. When you'll get a better connection, a broadband connection, then you can actually begin to see things more easily, hear things, and sometimes even see them fully, which I had couple of occasions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. So I would take from that if you're not feeling great on a certain day, let's say you've got a headache or you're tired, you've had a long drive, that's going to have an effect on what comes through.
Yeah, but not necessarily. It can be straight, because you've got to understand that there's often internal resistance. So there's the self-critical element, right, which is always there, the critical censor, and that always says, no, it can't be that, don't. Sometimes when you're tired, actually, you just think, oh, sorry, and then it just flows. And what I've noticed is also sometimes if I'm stressed or happy, I'm better at this. If I'm low or depressed, if my mood's depressed, I don't get anything. But if I'm stressed or anxious, then it can be really ramped up. And I've come to the conclusion it's to do because anxiety is just energy, isn't it? It's nervous energy. It's a lot of energy, as is happiness. And I also think that sometimes anxiety, you're sending out a distress signal and you're opening up. So I don't know if you've heard. Have you ever watched Stranger Things and heard about the CIA, the Montauk Project?
I did watch a few episodes, and I probably upset a lot of people because I didn't watch all of it.
You didn't like it? Okay, yeah. Well, there's all been this talk about that the CIA did horrible experiments on children to traumatize them, because the idea is that traumatized kids then actually become more psychic.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how would that happen? And I think it's because when you open up when you're anxious, there's an internal distress signal, and you just open up. help, send out a distress signal. You're opening up to the environment. Maybe they even knock holes in your aura. I don't know. But I mean, obviously. So when there are high energy states, it's easier. When you're depressed, it's hard. But sometimes when you're just tired, but relaxed, that you can be pretty good. So I sometimes I've gone to development circles and thought, it's going to be a crap evening. And I've pulled out the most amazing stuff. And you think, oh, God, where did that come from?
How strange. I guess that when I was thinking about it and I try to do creative work, it obviously works on a different plane entirely. If I'm tired, I can't do podcasts. I can't think about doing podcasts. But equally, this is a phenomena that is not fully understood. You have a framework around it which appears to work, but as you say, it could be wrong. It's a theoretical construct.
Well, it's not just the medium. It's the medium. I mean, spiritual would say it's not just the medium.
Right.
It's the medium and their team. And the way I look at it is, like I have a team of receptionists and helpers at the surgery. I've got an ethereal team. You have one guide who gives you energy, who will adjust the vibrations. Another guide will keep the spirits in line. It's almost like, you've got a receptionist there and you've got them queuing up.
So your spirit guide is curating who comes through to you, almost.
Yeah, that's the idea. And this is where we get into Angelina Jolie. Do you want to hear the story about Angelina Jolie?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, right. So I'm in my surgery one day and I'm aware of this tall figure behind me because I'm into this, right? I'm really into this. Weird stuff's happening. Doesn't happen so much now because when you first get into all this, you open up, you become what's called a space cadet. You get overexcited, you lose touch with planet Earth. We all go through the space cadet phase. I was in the space cadet phase. I'm at work and I felt this guy behind me, tall guy, African, obviously, I could just sense it. And I said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm your African guide." I thought, that's great because Derek Akora's got an African guide. Cool, Sam, I have one of them. That's great.
Wow.
I'm getting an African guide now. Yeah. So I said, "Well, what's your name?" He said, "Call me Koza." So I was in front of my computer. I typed in Koza, Kosa, into the computer. We've got Xosa, which is a Oza. It's pronounced with a click. Oza, which is a tribe. So Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela were members of the Koza tribe. So I thought, okay, is that your name or your tribal name? He said, "Just call me Koza. It's fine." Okay. So, so he kept on introducing himself to me. And I'm thinking, look, I don't believe in guides because, it's very hard to think of guides, especially to think your guides are hanging around. Well, can they watch you when you're going to the toilet? I mean, who want to hang around me anyway? It's boring. I mean, I get bored with the stuff I do half the time. So anyway, so I was really wrestling with this concept of guides. So he'd already, I was driving to work one day and I had to get a print cartridge and I had to go into PC World. And in those days, PC World was really long queue. And I thought, oh God, if I go into PC World, I'll be late for surgery. And I heard him say, "Don't worry, I'm going to PC World." I thought, okay, I'll test you because you're meant to test your guides. So I thought, okay, Koza, I'll test you. Go into PC World, park the car, go in there. It's empty. Not only that, the woman at the till is my patient. And the cartridge I want is right by the till. I said, "I have one of them." She said, "Okay, doc, 10% discount. I'll give you all my staff discount." Back in no time. And he's chuckling. But where Angelina Jolie comes into this, sorry, because so I'm at home and I'm sitting there getting into a bit of a stew because, here I am thinking long and hard, what are these spirit guides? How can they fit it? How can this be real? I'm hearing voices in my head, sort of, and I'm a doctor, and how do I explain it? And going in these various thought loops because it was really, it was trying to get my head around this. I mean, I'm comfortable with it now, but I wasn't comfortable with it in those days. And I thought, I've got to stop this. The kids have gone to bed. Poona's gone to bed. My son Paul had recorded Lara Croft and the Cradle of Life, and it was in the video. It's a videotape. It's sat on top of the videotape machine for about 9 months. He recorded it before I actually got into my development circle.
Right.
So I put it in, and I thought, I'll watch it. Quite fancy Angelina Jolie, and it's a kids' film. So I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, this feels a bit silly, really, isn't it? And then I start thinking, who is this guy Koza, and is he real? And as I'm thinking that, Angelina Jolie on the screen as Lara Croft picks up a phone and says, "Tell Koza to meet me north of his village. We're off to Kilimanjaro." I thought, what? Freeze frame. I'm getting messages on this. I've now become schizophrenic because my television's giving me messages. Rewind, play it back. She actually bloody said it. I thought, right, now you've got me. The next half of the film is her guide, Koza, leading her across the plains of Kilimanjaro, fighting off spirits. And I think the next day, that was on a Wednesday. So next Thursday, it was the circle. So I go into my group and say, what happened? How could that be? And he said, oh, it's your guys. It's that, it's there. But I said, they can do that. I said, but how? They're not gods. I mean, you had to have the director who made the film. My son Paul had to record it. She had to say the words. That was done before I was there. And then I had to watch it at the right time. How does that work? They said, oh, well, they can do that.
That is bizarre.
Yeah, totally bizarre. I mean, things like that was happening all the time. Should I tell you about Nestor? Can I tell you something about Nestor? Yeah. My other guy. So one day we're meditating at there's another medium called Keith Miller. And Keith was one of these spiritualists who's absolutely, there's one way of doing it, right? So we're going to meet our monk. Everyone's got a monk. So we're in our circle. You're going to meet your monk. And then one of the girls said, Keith, I haven't got a monk. Can I have a nun? No, you can't have a nun. You've got to have a monk. Oh, all right, Keith. Anyway, so we're meditating. And I'd actually already met this monk in a previous meditation. So we're meditating and I find myself on this bench under a cedar tree. And there's this guy who presents like the Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe from
I love him.
that sort of avuncular face,
yeah.
But wearing these monk robes. And he says, hello, little brother. I said, well, he couldn't be little brother. I said, well, we were Nestorian monks in 9th century Syria. I thought, okay, fine. And you were a fussy little monk and you did all the admin of the monastery. And that's why you're into computers and office equipment in this life. I said, what? He said, yeah, you were born into this life because you really wanted to explore computers and office equipment. And you always used to like office catalogs. I love them, still do. I flick through. I thought, really? Is that really a reason to become reincarnated? Because office equipment thing. Anyway, whatever. Anyway, so Nestor. So how did Nestor? Because guys are meant to prove themselves. So how did Nestor prove himself? So as I was having this dialogue, so I'm in Enfield Public Library. No, hang on, I've got to tell you this story. When I was at school, remember I said I used to work as a librarian in the school to get out doing, right. So I was about 12 and there was a sixth former called Lyndon Lewington, and he used to twist my ear and call me idiot child. And he was really impressed me. So Lyndon left medical, he left the school and I hadn't seen him for years. And then one day I'm at the local library in Bushel Park. And I saw this guy, and I said to, sorry. So I bumped into Lyndon because when I was a sixth former, I was choosing to go to medical school. I worked as a librarian at Wood Green Library, and I was transferred for one day to a different library and bumped into Lyndon Lewington. He's just finished his degree, which was in neuroscience, and he was interested in what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm going to go to medical school. And I hadn't chosen Nottingham. I'd chosen Manchester for my first choice and Cardiff for my second. And he took me home in his car. And as I got out of the car, I said, Ian, you should look at the Nottingham prospectus. It's really good. And I remember him leaning out of it as I got out of the car, leaning for me, he said, Ian, make sure you look at Nottingham prospectus. It's really good. So I did. And I went to Nottingham and I met my wife, changed my life. And that was just for one day. He'd been transferred to that library just for one day. So I just met him on that day. And then some years later, I've got my kids. I've got my kids and my wife in tow. We're at a local library. And there's another guy, rather portly guy with grey hair, with a younger wife and two kids. And I said to my wife, Poona, I said, that guy's Lyndon Lewington. She said, who's he? I said, well, he's the guy who told me to go to Nottingham. And basically, because I went to Nottingham, he actually brought us together in this strange way. So I went up to him. I said, are you Lyndon Lewington? He said, he jumped back. I've got this habit of going up to people and sort of challenging them. He said, yeah. I said, I'm Ian Rubenstein. You used to twist my ear and call me idiot child. You told me to go to Nottingham Medical School. I'm now a doctor. Here's my wife and children. Thank you. He went white and said, oh, my God. He said, Ian, after I told you to go to medical school, I went to medical school. I'm now a cardiologist at Hammersmith. And this is my wife. It turned out that his wife was a nurse who works at the health centre next to my wife's. We just looked at each other. And at which point the librarian said, can you keep the noise down? I've never heard anything so stupid in all my life.
Could you get a room, please?
Right. So where am I going with this? Because Nestor hasn't come into this. Okay, so I bear that in mind. So Lyndon keeps on popping into my life, and we've got libraries. So I'm thinking about Nestor, my guide, and I'm choosing some books in Enfield Library, and I want to get some sunglasses from Millets. And I heard this voice behind me in my head saying, Ian, put the books down, go into Millets, get your sunglasses. You've got a meeting. I'm saying to this, who are you? I'm Nestor. No, you're not. You're me. No, just trust me. I thought, okay, I'll test you. So I put the books down, left the library, went to Millets, got my sunglasses. I said, what do I do now? He said, go into Boots. So I go into Boots in Enfield. I thought, what I'm doing here. And as literally in front of the door, there's Lyndon Lewington and his wife. And I said, Lyndon. He says, Ian. I said, Lyndon, what are you doing here? He said, I've come to get some medicines. He said, what are you doing here? I said, well, I came here to meet you. My spirit guide Nestor told me that you'd be in here. And his wife looked shocked.
Of course.
She looked at him and I realized I was making a complete arse of myself. I said, nice to meet you, Lyndon. I just spun around on my heels and went. Actually, funnily enough, I met him at a party many years later. It turned out that he was actually quite interested in this. And he actually, he wasn't averse to it, but I thought I'd made a complete fool of myself. And I heard this voice in my head laughing. So that's how Nestor and Koza prove themselves. And I guess that's pretty good proof, really. I'm still not sure. It might just be me, but I don't know.
I don't know. It sounds pretty convincing.
I know. It's weird, isn't it? I know. I take a lot of convincing. Anyway, so when these guys don't speak to me when I'm doing mediumship, it's not like that. In fact, most mediums, so mediums on the whole will say they may not even know their guides. They're like in the background adjusting things. And I don't really call on them. I mean, you ask you guys to come forward, you invite them, but I'm not very much aware of their presence. So what it is more like, you're feeling something in your chest, or throat, or your head, like a feeling, and you get a feeling. So with me, what happens is I'll get this feeling, and then I'll get an image in my mind, and it'll start glowing brighter and brighter, just an image, like imagination. Then I'll get a feeling that it has to be for someone, either an individual or someone in that area, and I'll give that image out. And if the person says, yeah, that means something to me, that creates a link.
Yeah.
Once that they can take that, then it flows. If they say no, they can't take it, then you really are stumped. And that's because I'm not a professional medium. I mean, I'm still, after 20 years, I'm still training. I mean, a good medium will then, really plug away. I'm learning how to do that now. Because I don't go out on platform much and do demonstrations. I have done a few lately. I want to develop that. But because it's different when you're in one-to-one. When I'm with a patient, on one-to-one, then you're with them and you get this unfocused attention, which is what I do when I'm with patients often when I'm listening to them.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
It's like what you would be doing if you were doing psychotherapy, that unfocused attention.
So
and then you feel stuff coming in the back of your mind.
When you're with a client doing psychotherapy, there is, and I very much believe in this about spatialization in the rooms. There's the way that a room is used has, and I believe that a room has an energy to it. Nothing weird or out of the normal. It's just when you walk into a room and you think, oh, this is comfortable, or there's another room that isn't. Well, a good counselling room will have a level of comfort to it so that a client can open up and talk about what's ailing them. But I very much believe that when I'm with a patient, there is a energy in the room that's playing out in between two people, kind of in the air. And I'm a visual thinker too. I kind of see what's going on. And that's how I think. So, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I guess the question that I have for you is that, does this only work when you're in the presence of the person that you want to pass a message to, or being online would still be okay?
Sometimes better online. I mean, when the pandemic came, so I was seeing this patient, I was giving her bereavement counselling. She'd had bereavement counselling, but it hadn't worked. Her mum and dad had died in quick succession, and she was really down. And I was seeing her, and I actually started giving you messages. I said, and she found it really helpful. And then the pandemic hit, and I was sent home. Didn't go into surgery for 4 months because I was at that time we thought men in their 60s were at risk. So me and my colleague Anthony, we worked from home. And we did phone conversation, or she emailed me, and she said it's a shame that we can't do mediumship because you're at home. And I said, actually, my development circle's now online, and it's surprisingly good. Why don't we do it over Zoom? I had a Zoom account. I sent her the link, and it was amazing. I've got to tell you this one. It was even better because this actually brought us both to tears. So her mum had died, and she was going through her mum's things. And I made the link with her. I can really, when it comes to this particular patient, I saw her recently. I can always pull good stuff for her. I saw this handbag in my head. I said, "Has your mum got a handbag?" She said, "Well, yeah, mum had a handbag." I said, "I'm seeing this handbag." And she said, "Well, I'm going through her things. I'm sure I've got a handbag." I said, "Okay." I said, "I don't know what that's about." So I put it to one side. And I said, "Is there such a thing as a charm necklace?" Because I saw this like a charm bracelet, but a long one. It was thick. I'd never heard of it. She said, "Yeah." I said, "Is there?" She said, "Yeah, mum had one." I said, "Well, I'd never heard of it." I said, "Can you get it?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Your mum wants to look at something." So she got it out. So this is where the Zoom happened, because she actually was at home. So she went into the other room, got this charm necklace, and I didn't even know these things existed. I said, your mum wants you to look at one of the things that's on it, the charms. One of the charms was a little silver handbag. So I said, "I think she wants you to look at the handbag." Then I saw the handbag. I said, "Does the handbag open?" She said, "Yeah, it's got a clasp." I said, "I think your mum wants you to open it." So she did. And inside was a little silver letter. And on it said, "I love you."
Oh, wow.
And we both burst into tears. It was amazing.
What a moment.
Oh, really? That was absolutely amazing. That was fantastic. And that wouldn't have happened if I'd have been in the surgery, because it was done over Zoom.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, I saw her recently, and she said it's been a couple of years since she said, "See what you can pull up." I said, "Well, I can't do it to order." Actually, with her, I can. So I said, "Okay." I saw her in the surgery, and I said, "What is it with all these drafts? I've seen these funny drafts, these odd draft creatures, like toys or something." And she started laughing. She wanted to get something from her dad and her mum. I said, because she's an artist, and her dad was an artist. She said, "There's an artist who paints crazy drafts, like with their necks in funny positions, things." She said, "My dad and I, we used to trade these postcards. I used to send him draft postcards of this artist. He used to send them back to me." And she actually sent me an email afterwards of these odd paintings. I didn't know this guy existed. But in the same consultation, after I said, "I've got your mum here now, and she's going on about Beatles." I said, "Is it the band, the Beatles, or is it about Beatles?" And she started laughing again. She said, "Mum and I used to play a game called Beetle. It's a board game, which I'd never heard of." I don't know if you've heard of it. I'd never heard of it.
I personally haven't, no.
I haven't. Yeah. Anyway, she went home. She sent me an email and photographed. Sent me a picture of it. So, I don't know where that came from. It's amazing.
So many threads, and also there's a lot of what to people would appear to be coincidences happening, but it always feels like there's more to it than coincidence.
Yeah. That's how do I don't see so many patients now because I'm semi-retired, so I don't. So what I'm trying to do now is more develop my mediumship out more with doing it, up on platform. So so I'm doing that. I've done a couple of fledgling days, which was all right, but it's very, very stressful. I used to think mediums were credulous people. They believe anything. Not a word of it. They are harsh. It's so much one-upmanship. The one thing I learned is that a lot of the people in the congregation are mediums themselves, and they'll be, "Oh, no, that's not good." There's a lot, "Oh, no, I don't like that. No, you didn't say that properly. No, you've got to do better than that." So they're really harsh judges. So it's not like, "Oh, yes, we believe everything." No, not like that at all. It's hard-edged, and so you're only as good as the last message you gave. So it's quite stressful, but I think I gave a message from a dog recently.
Well, actually, one of the questions I had written down actually is about do pets and animals come through? But
to me, I'm not a particularly animal. Yeah. So the very first fledgling day I did was at Vestry Road many years ago. And I was standing up and I saw this, could almost see it like a heat haze at the back of the church behind some people. And it was bounding around like an excited dog. So I just called over and said, have you lost a dog recently in spirit? I said, yeah. I said, I think he's behind you. And I could describe this big dog that was quite excited to get through. And he said, yeah, thank you. But the last one I was at was, I saw this woman over to the left. So I was standing up and she was to my right. And I was drawn to her. And I had this image of Scottish hills and castles and a man walking with two dogs.
Yeah.
And I said, are you anything to do with King Charles or Prince Charles? Because it was that sort of thing. Said, no, I realized it wasn't. It was the dogs. I said, hang on a minute. I said, these are dogs and they want to go walkies. I said, have you lost a dog recently? She said, yeah, I lost a couple of dogs a few months ago. I said, are you into dogs? She said, yeah, I'm a dog walker. I said, well, I think I've got your dogs here. And she asked me how they're doing. I said, they're rough. Yeah.
Everyone's a winner.
Everyone's a winner. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, Ian, before we move on to other things that are not mediumship related, I guess one question that I had for you was really, you appear to have had this in you throughout your life. So you had, I think so, yeah. You had experiences when you were young, and then it seems to have snowballed as you've got older. Do you think that everybody has it in them, or is it a certain few?
I'm not special. I think we all can do it. I think everybody can kick a football, but not many people can be David Beckham. I'm no David Beckham when it comes to mediumship. And I think, like anything, you can develop it if you really do it. I absolutely feel that I was led along the path. I think I was helped by whoever. But I think we can all do it. I can't believe, people say you're born, you can't develop. I don't believe it. I think we've all got the same equipment. We can all do it. We're not all predisposed to. I mean, I will never make a good piano player or football. I'm not interested in football. So I'm never going to be a footballer. Some people aren't going to be mediums, they're not interested. I think it's surprising what you could do if you wanted to. Like anything, it's 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. But I do feel that it was a journey. I mean, when I tell the story, because life's humdrum for me. You get up, you go to the gym, you got your family, everything. When I tell the story, I just realize how bloody weird it was. It was very exciting.
Yeah,
I really felt I was led along a path. And then, not even that. In 2013, I applied for a post, and that was Nestor. I actually heard him behind me. I've never applied for it. I was interested in computer programming.
Yes.
In fact, I was writing computer program when all this happened. And I actually think it was because I was concentrating so much on computers that my logical mind was preoccupied and this other stuff sneaked behind. Because it was, 9 years and I thought I was going to be the next Bill Gates, but it never happened. I've got no business head at all. I'm not interested in business really. And I looked up from my computer screen and I've gone psychic, But anyway, but one of the things was GPs have to fill out a lot of forms and they drive you mad. I had this idea for standardizing computer forms. And it was in my head. And I noticed I'm a fellow of the Royal College of General Practitioners, an advert in 2013. It was called the Sowerby Fellowship. Basically, it was this guy had put money forward to enable GPs to sort of develop things. And I wanted to develop computer software that would fill in forms. And I heard this Nestor saying, you should apply for it. I thought, I don't want to apply for it. So I applied for it, was interviewed, and I got it. And so I then dropped a day at work to spend time working on these system of forms, which eventually was used to refer all the patients in London for suspected cancer. Right? They were the 2-week wait forms, they called, and they were my forms. And that was part of it. And the other thing is my book's dedicated to my cousin Frances, who died of breast cancer. She's in my book. And I just think there's this theme of that as well. And I was then met lots of people in London, professors and people who I would never normally meet. And at the time I was promoting my book and I was talking about it. And a lot of them were interested in it, to my surprise. Remember one professor, she came up to me at an office do, said, tell me about your booking, tell me about your experiences. I suddenly realized that a lot of doctors were interested in this, and they wouldn't talk about it. But me being me, I would tell everybody. I actually think that was my job, and it gave permission for others to talk about it.
Yeah. Sort of the dam starting to burst. Type of thing.
Yeah.
Look, we'd be remiss if we don't mention your book before we move on to something that's non-mediumship. Okay. So it's Consulting Spirit, a doctor's experience with practical mediumship. It's available in hardback, paperback, and Kindle. It's published through Anomalist Books, and it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's my one book. I everybody says you should write another one, but to be honest, that book was written. It was I actually kept notes at the time. I was so confused by what was going on. I actually kept notes, and those notes then became my book. Maybe I will write another book, but it might not be. It might not be more of the same. It might be more about the philosophy of it. I don't know. I don't know. But I mean, life's difficult. I mean, there's so much going on.
Well, and I get a real sense of that. I listened in the lead up to the interview today. I listened to the one that you did with Howard Hughes, and that was 11 years ago.
I was his 100th. It was his 100th
episode. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. Yeah.
And one of the things that Howard says to you is about your boundless energy. I think he said, and that really doesn't seem to have changed. You seem just as sparky today as you did then. Yeah,
I'm 68 soon, so things hurt a bit more. Yeah, no, I mean, I do get very enthusiastic over this. I mean, I do get enthusiastic over things. Well, I mean, since the UAP thing.
Well, yeah, we're going to come to that in a minute. There is one thing that there's one thing I'm dying to ask you about, and it's kind of, it would be very naughty of me that for a guy that works in Enfield, and I'm guessing that you were living in the area at the time of the Enfield Poltergeist.
No, I wasn't.
No,
I was in Nottingham. No,
right.
No. So
that's a shame.
That time I was in Nottingham. But I mean, my practice is half a mile from the house in Green Street. Yeah. I have met everybody involved in that, apart from the girls and the mum. Haven't met them, but I've met all the neighbours. Roy, who lived across, so my patient Roy, used to be a used cooker shop across the road from me, and he actually witnessed the poltergeist. He said he went into the house once, sat down on a settee. The mother gave him a cup of tea on a saucer. He said, "Doc," he said, "the thing lifted up in the air. It was as if someone was walking across the room and smashed it into the wall." He said, "You've never seen anyone move, run out as fast as me." But I've met him. I think I mentioned I look after the grandson of the Enfield Poltergeist.
Okay.
He's a lovely guy.
Yeah.
And I've met loads of people, people who witnessed it or saw it or were involved in it peripherally. And I was very lucky that my wife worked with a GP in Muswell Hill who looked after Maurice Gross, who was the investigator.
Oh, wow.
And he met me in the gym one day. I said, "Ian, would you like to meet Maurice? Because you're into this sort of thing."
Yes, please. Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah." So Maurice phoned me. He gave me his number, and I phoned up Maurice. And he said, "Well, come round." Maurice played me the tapes. I saw his house. And I remember, as I listened to it, I spent about an hour and a half with him, 2 hours. And I met his wife, Betty. And I remember he was only a little guy with a handlebar moustache. And I remember as I shook hands to say goodbye, he looked at me and said, "Ian, I am absolutely convinced that we survived death."
Wow.
At the time, I didn't tell him what was happening to me, but I told him about Felicity's face. And he said, "I think you and your sister are undeveloped mediums." Then I said, "Well, actually, Maurice, I have to tell you, I am training as a medium."
I'm a developing medium,
Yeah. So, and then I gave a talk at the SPR. Because once my book was out, and I met Guy Playfair. Yeah. And then Guy actually did the blurb for my book. He was a lovely guy. Yeah. So I met them both. Yeah.
I mean, both Maurice and Guy have been completely whitewashed out of the Conjuring 2, which is the...
Oh, I mean, that was rubbish. Yeah. I mean, that was hilarious. I mean, the one, I mean, first of all, I mean, I'm a member of the Ghost Club. And Alan Murdy, I don't know if you know Alan, but he runs it. I was there, and they gave The Conjuring, the Enfield Poltergeist one. And first of all, when there's the basement that floods, right? There's a flood in the bay. Well, there aren't any. You don't have basements like that in this country. They're in America. No. And then the false teeth that bite them in the butt. I mean, that was hilarious. We were wetting ourselves. We were falling out. We had a private sitting in a pub in London, and we were all absolutely killing ourselves. We laughed. That was a load of rubbish. That really was. But the case was real. I mean, absolutely.
What a fantastic experience for you to meet all of these people.
I think they said that the family weren't really capable of actually, they're accused of putting all this on, and it was all tricks and everything. But I think bar one case where the girls took one of the tape recorders and they forgot to turn it off so you could hear them in the background. They were playing tricks on Morris. But they were not capable of a family to actually have done all this because, police were there. Police saw what was going on.
Yeah. In fact,
the chairs moving across and stuff like that.
I looked after the family of the crossing lady who saw the levitation from the window. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I've looked at, they've all been it's literally in my area. It's so apt that I should be, the mediumistic doctor in the Enfield Poltergeist. It's great, isn't it? Yeah. But let me tell you this story. So the grandson of the poltergeist is my patient. So we're in the staff room and we got a temp, and she's saying, this is just before the film was made. She said, "What's all this about the Enfield Poltergeist?" So they all looked at me. I said, "Haven't you heard about the Enfield Poltergeist?" So I told her the story. Anyway, I had to do a visit, a home visit. And I took a home visit that was at the north end of Enfield because there was a shop called Direct Boot and Shoe, and they do printed T-shirts. At the time, I was a member of a ghost club because my patient Mark, he ran a ghost club. And in order to do the ghost club, when you go out on site, you have to wear this T-shirt so the police know who you are. Mm-hmm. You're in sort of uniform. So I thought, okay, I'll go and do this visit, and I'll go and see this patient. But it took a bit longer to do this visit because they actually weave the print. It's like not printed, it's actually woven, sort of like a mechanical weave, computer control weaving. Anyway, it took an hour. So I knock on the patient's door. I say, "I'm really sorry I'm late." He said, I said, "I had to get my T-shirt printed." He said, "What's the T-shirt for?" I said, "I'm a member of a ghost club." And the guy said, "Oh, you should speak to my dad. He's into that sort of thing." I said, "Oh, really?" So I saw this patient, treated him, gave him a sick note, and went downstairs to see his dad. And I said, "He tells me that your son told me you're into this." He said, "Yeah, I'm the son of the Enfield Poltergeist." I said, "What?" Bearing in mind, I was just talking about it.
Yeah.
I'd gone to get a T-shirt for Ghosts Club, and now I was seeing the son of the Enfield. It's weird. And I said, "I was just talking about this." I said, "My one of the staff, she's interested in it." She said, so he came down to pick up something from a patient. And when he came down, I introduced him to the temp who asked about the Enfield Poltergeist. It's the weird stuff that happens.
It's part of the thread.
Yeah, the Enfield, paranormal centre of London, you see.
But then North London is quite odd because, just a few miles down, you've got Highgate, and obviously in the late 60s and 70s, you had the Highgate Vampire.
You've got to be a bit odd to live in North London,
I used to live in East London, and I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. All the sensible people have left.
Yeah. I think it would be something that we have to talk about, as we're both very intrigued by what's going on at the moment in the world of UAPs.
Yeah.
2 words for you. Dave Grush. What do you think?
My hero. I think he's amazing. I've been into this since I was 6.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember there used to be a thing called Here and Now. It used to be a news program. I remember the Warminster thing was on.
Yeah.
Oh. And they had that picture of the flying saucers from Warminster. Yeah. I remember going to bed being terrified that the Marshals were going to land.
Well, the Warminster thing as well.
The Warminster thing, yeah. That was the time of Warminster. And the early 60s, there was a lot of this going around. But I've always been interested in it. I've always read about it. I followed the whole thing as long as I can remember. And I've always been absolutely convinced that there's something to it. It's just no doubt in my mind. I may have my doubt about that spiritualism might not be what it is, but I absolutely believe that whatever it is, there's a reality to this. And I just think it's amazing that it's come out. And I'm hoping that we will, well, I'm pretty certain. I mean, I follow Ross Coulthart and the others, Need to Know and all those. And I'm hoping it will come out. But what I find amazing is it really has been downplayed by the media.
The media have been, I'm not going to be one of these conspiracy theorists who say that they get to the media, although I suspect they might get to.
I think they do.
I think they get to individuals within the media, and then that plays. I was having a conversation with somebody on Facebook yesterday about a certain journalist over in the States who is bashing at the moment everything that's going on, calling people like Lou Elizondo a shill.
Yeah, I know who you mean. I know exactly who you mean.
And
we won't mention his name.
No, there's no need. But it's. I just think, okay, you have to be so incredibly tone deaf to not realize that there's something very, very special going on now. Something I call it a forced disclosure by the media, if you like, and i.e. a section of the media. I think people like Ross Coulthart have done amazing journalism, which he is a mainstream journalist, but other mainstream journalists have been shown to be incredibly lacking in this field. And I think, it's going to be a bit of a battle to make it properly mainstream now. I think it might get there. I think it's going to be very interesting next 12 months anyway. Let's put it that way.
Word spreading. I mean, I've been going on about it since June the 7th, since he came out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. You can tell people you're a medium, and they're very polite. Once you tell people you're into UFOs, they look at you like you're bonkers. Okay, I'm going to say about Laurie. Okay. Yeah. So Laurie is a dentist. He passed away now. But he was into the Anunnaki. He believed that he was into that, and he would bore everybody sick of this. So I'm at one of my spiritualist friends' house, Charles, and his wife Rita says, "Ian, you sit for dinner. When we're at dinner, you sit next to Laurie because I know you're interested in UFOs, and Laurie, you'll be interested in what Laurie has to say. And no one else is." So I said, "Yeah." So I had a nice conversation with Laurie, and I said to Laurie after you let me get a word in, I said, "You know what, Laurie? I think you're right." He said, "What?" He said, "I think you're right." Because you said, I'm interested in UFOs, and I think they're still coming. He looked at me and said, "What? You believe in UFOs? Are you mad?" And he just spent half an hour telling me he believed that the Anunnaki came down here and they enslaved the ancient people to make their gold. I'm thinking, I'd crossed his boggle threshold. It was all right in biblical times. He was okay with that. But how can you believe they're here?
There's very similar parallels throughout the whole of the paranormal spectrum, if you like. People who are big into Bigfoot, for instance, and then there's others who will say that Bigfoot are seen around the same time as UFOs are seen, and then there's another group who will go, "You're clearly balmy. You can't believe that. That's just this is purely a cryptid thing." I don't know the truth, but what I'm not going to do is jump down somebody's neck for having an opinion. And I just am very happy at the moment that information is coming through. It's clear that journalists like Ross Coulthart, George Knapp, Corbell, etc., they obviously know a lot more than they're prepared to say. And that gives me a sense of comfort, actually. It might annoy a lot of people because they want to know, right? Yeah. But for somebody like Ross Coulthart to actually nail his colours to the mast over Dave Grush, it means he's done his work. It means, and he said so himself, that other people are coming forward and saying, yeah, Dave Grush is the real deal. And that to me is very comforting. And I'm quite happy actually to sit back and look at what's happening and think, do you know what? This is a big moment in this particular topic. It's a huge moment. And if it does come to pass that it's true, then it's a gargantuan moment for the world.
Yeah, I mean, I have absolutely no doubt that it's true. I mean, really, it all dovetails. I mean, if you follow the history and the stories, there's just so much going on. I mean, what I find amazing is some of the wilder claims might be true.
What do you consider to be the wilder ones?
Oh, the idea. I mean, do you remember Nick Cook wrote the book, The Hunt for Zero Point?
I've not read it.
Okay, worth reading. He went on so Nick Cook was the aviation editor of Jane's Defence Weekly.
Okay.
And in the late 90s wrote a book called The Hunt for Zero Point. And he'd come across anti-gravity research or gravity control research. And he just wondered, he said something weird happened in the 1950s. And Michael Strack goes on about this as well. There were lots of magazine articles saying gravity is going to be the next thing. We'll soon have gravity control. And then it just stopped. Nothing. And then it went quiet. And then it was ridiculed. And he just wondered if something had happened in the 1950s and somebody had mastered it. Then you hear about Thomas Townsend Brown and people like that who ended up with the idea of electrogravitics, and they went silent because they started working for the US government. Then you hear Stephen Greer, who's absolutely certain. I don't know what to make of Stephen Greer, but you look at the people he's got in his disclosure project, and they're very good witnesses.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely, he says gravity was mastered in October 1954. Now, if maybe it was, I don't know, and it's been suppressed, but if you just think the Wright Flyer was 1903 and they landed on the moon in 1969, say that's 65 years. If we really did master gravity in 1954, it's now 69 years. How many years is it since 1954? Yeah. Year older. Yeah. What if you can go from nothing to world air travel, air forces, and God knows what else? If you had mastered anti-gravity or gravity control in 1954, what could we have out there? And you think of Gary McKinnon.
Yes.
And what he found, this weird thing with 2 geodesic domes in orbit, and then a list of non-terrestrial officers with ships that weren't in the US inventory. And then you've got like Daniel Inouye, who says there's a secret,
space program.
Space program and all this stuff. And then Reagan, we can put 300 people in orbit in the 1980s. What the hell's going on? So it may be even more weird than we think.
Maybe it all started in 1947.
Well, before that, I mean, David Grush is saying before that, isn't he? He says 1933.
I think magenta, which is what you're referring to, is perhaps the way that this is going to come out, because a lot of things that happened on sovereign US soil will have been classified there. So it's going to be very difficult, I suspect, to talk about it openly. But magenta and the alleged crash that happened there, it was in Italy. Mussolini was in charge. It was then, if this is correct, subsequently Pope Pius XII.
I mean, it's like a Dan Brown novel, isn't it?
Brilliant.
You've got the Vatican involved.
In fact, it's better than a Dan Brown novel.
Much better,
if Pope Pius XII has got information or had information that it was then passed over to the Americans in 1944, I think it was. Now, all of that stuff that happened was outside of the classification system, if you like, of the American government. So if there's stuff written down, and I've seen a couple of documents to do with magenta, nothing earth-shattering, but the Vatican archives and all of that, not controlled by America. And I do wonder if that might be where it all starts to come untangled, because there is a reason, I think, that magenta was mentioned in Congress rather than Roswell. And I think it's the little chink in the armor where they can start to pick things apart, perhaps.
But the next question is, why now? And I mean, I've heard various things. Maybe this, I mean, who's it goes on about? I mean, Stephen Greer goes on about the free energy. They're actually flying free energy. Now, if you think about it, this is interesting. I'm having a discussion on my paranormal discussion group. So let's just speculate wildly. If you can pull free energy out of the ether, right? 0 point field. We know that energy and matter are the same thing. You can create, presumably, maybe they can create matter out of the ether.
Right.
Okay. I mean, virtual particles, maybe you can de-virtualize them. I mean, that's what happens in black holes. If a virtual particle appears near an event horizon, one goes into the black hole and the other one becomes real. So maybe they can do that. So, these seamless UFOs, no one knew how they'd be created, but it turns out now we can imagine 3D printing, can't we?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
But they're now talking about metamaterials that are fabricated at the atomic scale. Maybe maybe you create them like a Star Trek replicator,
Yes.
or maybe maybe if you're really, really clever, you can do something with space-time that creates harmonics or ripples in space-time that actually, and where the ripples form, atoms just appear.
Okay.
And do you remember that mysterious visitor that visited Bryce Sable? You know, the one who turned up when you've heard the story about Bryce Sable?
I don't think I have.
The premiere of Dark Skies.
Ah, right.
At the party, this guy turns up and says, he gives a little piece of paper and says, the secret of the universe is all to do with frequency, light, and vibration, all this stuff. It just keeps on coming up. I just wonder if maybe, you know, if free will has you've got these non-human intelligences that are really, really clever. Maybe they know how to create stuff literally out of thin air. The reason why I say this is where I want to get back to mediumship, because it's all linked. In fact, Rubenstein's first law of the paranormal is it always ends. I've got 3 laws. It always ends with aliens. Because, in other words, it's not a silo. Whichever you get into, you'll always end up with aliens. So I've got friends in the paranormal discussion group that actually sat at the skull circle, the experimental circle.
Okay.
And they witnessed the mini UFO that appeared. And they witnessed a lot of the stuff like things being dematerialized there 1 minute, and then suddenly it's just ethereal. You can put your hands through it. And they explained that on the other side, they were creating an energy template that was the real thing, and then it would crystallize in our world. And I'm just wondering, you know, and they talked about people from the 10th dimension coming through. Yeah. And they had this alien called Blue. Now, actually, my friends witnessed this. In fact, they witnessed not just that, they witnessed lights being spinning around the room. One of my friends, the light went like an olive light, went through her body, about the size of an olive, and came out with a popping noise. She felt it fizz through her body.
My word.
One of them was, I think, they went twice. One of them was this little boy came up and gave him a hug, but it only materialized there's nothing from the forehead upwards. It gave him a shock. He said, "Don't worry, mister, next time I'll bring all of myself through." And this stuff. So this idea of materialization and apports. So if we de-silo, get out the silo and realize that UAP, UFOs often linked with a lot of mediumistic phenomena. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a commonality there, but it does your head in a bit, because you think, okay, well, you know, it's the spirit world. Maybe I can get that. And where are these people from? And it may be that we haven't got the correct cosmology. I mean, if you're an ancient Greek, you believe that the Earth was at the center. Mm-hmm. Well, some of you did, and that, or medieval days, that you had the center of the stationary Earth and glass spheres, right? You wouldn't even have a concept of a large universe with galaxies. You wouldn't know what to make of it. It may be that we haven't got the right concepts. So maybe they're not coming from another planet, maybe coming from another realm. And I'll use the term realm rather than dimension or a parallel universe, because we don't know what these realms are. No. And then you're into fairies and Bigfoot. And then, before you know it, you've opened up the whole can of worms.
Yes. Yeah, everything.
You've got full-on ontological shock. And you're an ITU.
As a friend of mine, Forrest Burgess, says, everything's connected.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think we're going to draw the podcast to a close. I think it's been an excellent chat. Any final thoughts from you, Ian, before we wrap up?
No, I just want to let you know that once David Grush came out on June the 7th, inside my head is a little cartoon guy running around saying, aliens.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think I've watched, I actually got me onto Twitter. I avoided Twitter, but I thought I've got to get onto Twitter. Okay. I never understood how it worked. Then they bloody changed the name to X.
I'm okay with that. So a little Giorgio Tsoukalos running around going, "Told you so."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've actually done a meme. I've got Stanton Friedman. I've got a picture of Stanton Friedman. I always said it was aliens, and I put at the bottom triple underlined. Yeah, you used to say triple underlined.
Yeah,
you'd always say that. I've done a.
It's one thing that saddens me.
Yes,
that Stanton Friedman, Paul Hellyer. Yeah. Art Bell, you know, all of those people in the physical realm, if you like, are not around to see it, and I think that's a crying shame.
I'm gonna have to have a good look into this magenta stuff because it has passed me by a little bit.
Sure,
but I've always thought that 1947, obviously Roswell, and what happened afterwards, and then the microchip evolution, everything like that. And I think you're right, Ian. Yeah, all of a sudden we went from planes that could just about take off and fly to the moon landings in inverted commas, because I'm not a moon landing denier. I do have friends who are.
Yeah, I have friends who are as well. Yeah,
but I
think they landed. I'm sorry.
I think they landed, but they didn't land in a baked bean tin.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Funny enough, we're just going. We've got a squirrel in our loft, so we're clearing out the loft. The bloody thing. It's. I hope it doesn't destroy the house. Anyway, but I found my old books from the moon landing.
Oh,
do you remember?
Brilliant.
One's called Moonslaw, and it was about the land. I remember being so excited. I was 13 when they landed on the moon. I was so excited, and then I remember hearing about the space shuttle, and it all was stopped. We're meant to be on Mars by now, But I mean, what I really hope. I mean, I think Elon Musk is a great engineer. I think. I'm not so sure I like what he's done to Twitter, but I'm hoping that by the time Starship launches off, we'll be flying past them in our own UFO saying hello.
I must admit, looking at the way that Starship is meant to come back to land, I don't think I would ever want to go on it. Yeah. That whole flipping around thing does not sit comfortably with me at all. Yeah. Okay. Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure having you along.
Absolutely.
I've really enjoyed our conversation.
I've really enjoyed it. So I'm very grateful to you. Thank you very much for making the time for us.
Oh, it's so nice to be able to speak to someone who believes that the UFO thing is important, because I went out for a meal with my friend Steve the other day, and I was going on about it. He said, Ian, I'm not interested in it. I said, how can you not be interested in it? He said, I'm just not interested in it. I just... the two biggest questions: what happens when we die, and is there alien life?
Arthur C. Clarke used to say, didn't he, that there were two things. It's either we are the only life in the universe, or there is intelligent life. Mm-hmm. Now, am I paraphrasing him? But didn't he say
no? Both are equally scary.
Both are equally scary. Absolutely. Yeah.
But Enrico Fermi, the Fermi paradox. He asked, "Where are they?" And I was thinking, well, they're here. That's what the UFOs are.
Yeah.
What is that? Anyway, they're here, but they're just hiding. They're very tiny.
Fantastic. I think Douglas Adams said that there was a swarm of war spaceships attacked the Earth and then were swallowed up by a small dog.
By a small dog.
Yeah. Okay.
To a drastic miscalculation of scale.
Yeah, that's right. Dr. Ian Rubenstein, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, then please do help support us by making a small donation. You can find a donate button on the website at anomaly.co.uk, and you will find all of our episodes there too. We also have a presence on YouTube, and our X handle is at AnomalyCast. We're available on all major podcast services. Just search for Anomaly Paranormal Podcast. Thank you to Xperia for our theme music. You can find more from Xperia on Epidemic Sounds. If you would like to recommend a guest or to be one, get in touch with Paul at anomaly.co.uk. Until next time, we'll be seeing you.